I think this is a snapshot of why the program is so much better off right now than it was, say, 2 years ago. They've been able to build to a moment where not everything has to be right for them to win, Ira. In fact, a lot can be wrong, and they find ways to win now.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I thought, it was a pretty daunting task if you think about it. Again, if you put yourself in Jordan Travis's shoes, or really anybody in the offense's shoes, then you're sitting there and you're like, okay, we don't have maybe 4 of our top wide receivers, maybe 5 totally are not totally healthy. And then you look at the defense you're playing, who's a pretty good defense anyway, then the style of defense that they play, and then the fact that they know they're daring you to throw the football. I just think it was a really daunting task. And so I think they get credit on both sides. I think you give this entire team credit for, one, making the plays they had to when they were shorthanded. But number 2, and this is it's harder to quantify, but I think it's just as important, is, as you're alluding to, like you never sensed any panic or frustration or desperation. There was very much an attitude of, okay, let's keep chopping wood. Let's keep doing what we have to do to give ourselves a chance to win this game. And eventually they did that. But sometimes in a game like that, especially when things aren't going well for you, the Toafili fumble, you get stopped on a 4th down, all those things are kind of piling up. You could beat yourself by trying to do too much or get dejected. And you didn't see any of that. I thought it spoke to the maturity of this team as much as just the fact that they had the ability to overcome.
I want your big picture assessment. I tried to give it to start the show, and I did so in a salty manner, telling the rest of the ACC that they can go to hell. Wasn't that far long ago, I should say, that you and I and everybody else in the Warchant staff found ourselves up in beautiful Charlotte, North Carolina, and we could hear very clearly the snickering, the disdain, the question marks surrounding this program. How dare you? You guys have been awfully boisterous for a group that hasn't won a damn thing in forever, and now we're supposed to believe you're going to be great, carry the day. They were almost as if they were saying to Florida State, you better be, with all this talk and this attempt to get out of the conference. Well, guess what? They are. They've just stamped their ticket to Charlotte. They're the best team in the ACC, and they're the ACC's last hope of anything meaningful. It's all Florida State all the time, and it has to hurt their soul. It's a beautiful thing to think about how much they're squirming right now, knowing that their beloved Duke fell off a cliff and North Carolina fell off a cliff, and they have nobody else they can rely on but Florida State. But I also think big picture, as much as that schadenfreude feels good, it speaks to how far this team has come, even from last year, but go back 2 years ago, certainly 5-7 to where they are now, the lone bright spot in the ACC.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and listen to that first hour, because if that's just a snippet the vitriol, yeah. I want to go back and soak it all up, because I think that's a great point. Yeah, and we are a little bit more sensitive to it because we do probably consume more of the ACC media than maybe just a normal Florida State fan might, because we're in the media and we're seeing more of what's out there. But yeah, I thought all summer it was ridiculous in the ACC kickoff. But then even going into the season, there was just this pushback to the national narrative. Nationally, if you go back to the spring, Mark Schlabach, other people in college football were putting Florida State as a team that might be one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the country back going into last spring, and certainly coming out of last spring. But in the ACC, it was just feeling like you just kept hearing, well, why are you guys complaining so much? What have you guys done lately? Right. You guys can't even beat Wake Forest. Well, you know what? They did beat Wake Forest. And you know what? They're now 7-0 in the conference. They've clinched an appearance in the ACC championship game with like a month to go. They've run roughshod over this conference. So yeah, man, it is. If you're Michael Alford, and if you're Mike Norvell, think about how confident Michael Alford was and Mike Norvell was when they went to the ACC spring meetings a year ago, and they were talking that talk about the conference and what Florida State should get, what portion of the revenue Florida State should get because they deserve it based on TV ratings. Now you go back into their next year. Just imagine the swagger that Michael Alford is going to walk. Those Vince McMahon memes are going to be sprouting up all over the place.
Yeah. I still think they've got to be loud about getting out of here. It ain't going to get that much better anytime soon. Let's keep on ringing the bell. The emergency red button has to be mashed over and over and over again, especially now that you have leverage. You didn't have it before. Well, not as much as you have it now. And now you can really be boastful about it. I think Florida State's here to stay in this conversation of ACC championships for as long as they remain in the conference and this coaching staff is in place. I think it's only going to get better. Yes, they're going to lose some key pieces at the end of this year, but I think that they're building on things. We're seeing this now, and they have a chance to bring in an elite class, and they're going to hit the portal again. So they're going to continue to rise the ranks and be consistent. It'll be a 12-team playoff next year. Florida State should be in that. It gets fun. All right, now I got to get to the gist of what we're all thinking, which is, okay, Florida State ought to, you look at the percentages according to Vegas, they ought to finish the regular season undefeated. Miami is reeling. They're coming off a 6-point performance against NC State. Florida now has a bunch of tough games in a row to close out their season after losing at home to Arkansas. You got a chance to bury your in-state rivals, but you can't do all of this with relative ease unless you get healthy. And I hinted last week that this team was not healthy, but we're not allowed to say certain things, as you well know. We think we're all right for Saturday? I mean, are we getting close to getting back to something that resembles full strength in the wide receiver room as far as we know? Did you get any sense of that from Mike Norvell today?
Yeah, I thought, if you look at the words he used when Corey asked him about that today, the words aren't super strong. He's never going to be super definitive with injuries either way because he wants to leave the wiggle room, even if he knew today that everybody was going to be available. He wouldn't say that because then we would know a week from now or 2 weeks from now when he's not as definitive. Oh, okay, that must mean they're not. So he's never going to be real definitive either way with injuries. But when the way Corey asked the question, the way Norvell responded, basically start laughing like at the idea that yes, they are going to come back. And then he said, like he almost interrupted him to say, yeah, it's going to be a lot better. Like it was almost like he couldn't control his enthusiasm about the fact that he expects them to be back. Then when you actually look at the words, and maybe I'm reading too much into that, but that's just my feeling being there. And then when you look at the words, he said, a lot more guys participated Sunday night than had been participating last week. I still think Mike Norvell's never going to admit it. And if they had lost that game, it would have looked like a colossal disaster if that's what he did. I still believe that maybe a couple of those guys could have played if they were playing Miami last week. They were not. They were playing Pitt. And I think there's a good chance they'll be closer to full strength this Saturday.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think there's no question that if this were a championship game or a game that could vault you into the playoff or something like that, he would have had to ask some guys to suck it up and play, and they probably could have. But I think if you have the opportunity to ensure that you're going to be healthy the rest of the way by giving certain guys an extra week, why would you not do it? That also speaks, Ira, while we're talking about it, that speaks to a whole lot of trust, man. That is a coach telling what players he does have available, I trust you to get the job done despite not having the very best players we have on this roster, not named Jordan Travis. They were missing really big-time players. It's one thing to say, okay, well, we're out Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, but we have Akeem Williams and a healthy Vendravius Jacobs today. No, you don't. You don't have Akeem Williams. You don't have a healthy Vendravius Jacobs. Okay, well, we'll have a healthy Portier and what? No, you don't. No, you don't. So this was a really kind of a nerve-wracking test of faith. It's like when you leave your kids at home for the first time and you're like, all right, now I trust you, but you really don't. You get in that car with your wife and you're like, man, I'm afraid we're going to come home too. They got to pass the test.
Especially if they're too young to know how to use the phone. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's a great point. And I think it speaks to two things. One is, if you think about the way he's coached this year, I think there's again, he's never going to say anything to disrespect opponents. But I think if you go back to the decisions he's made in some of these games, some of the decisions to go for it on fourth down on his own side of the 50, just to be aggressive in different situations, I think he thinks they're much better than everybody they've played, maybe other than Clemson and LSU. I think he thinks that these teams can't beat them unless something just catastrophic happens. So I think that gives you some confidence in that situation. The other thing I think it really says is, give this coaching staff a lot of credit for making some chicken salad with what they had in terms of Jordan throws for 360 yards, but in the most unorthodox of ways. All the screens they had to run and hitting so many different targets and getting Ja'Kai to turn in a career performance. Again, all of that speaks to really a tremendous job by a coaching staff that didn't have. It's got to be pretty easy to coach an offensive game plan with the talent they've had for most of the first 8 or 9 weeks. But Saturday was a challenge, and the coaching staff deserves credit too.
It's a fun time to be covering Florida State. Nobody does it better than Ira Schoffel. I'll talk to you tomorrow, brother. Be good.
Thanks, guys.
All right, take care. Ira Schoffel, as I say, and have been for many years now.